Namaskar. Welcome to this edition of the India Foundation podcast. This edition of the India Foundation podcast features the Kashmir session of the working group meeting on India 2030. In this session, we have with us Shri Aditya Raj Kaul, senior journalist, Shri Junaid Azim Mattu, Mayor, Srinagar Municipal Corporation, and this session is chaired by Shri Ram Madhav, member, Board of Governors at India Foundation.
Important session of the evening, future of Jammu and Kashmir. What we will do is, we will listen to both the panelists initially for some time, then I will also put some questions to them, then you also can ask your questions or give your comments. First, I ask Aditya Raj Kaulji to give his views on, from here or from the podium, wherever you are comfortable, future.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ram Madhavji, and thank you very much to India Foundation for inviting me to this kind of an internal exercise and perhaps to debate and understand much deeper what's been happening in Jammu and Kashmir and what should happen in the next few years. As somebody who's been tracking not exactly more so the politics of J&K, but as somebody who's been tracking the security more closely, I'll keep it very short and brief about what's been happening. Of course, we have seen very closely in the last 1 year or so the changes that have been made, historic changes that have been made, and a message that has been conveyed through that change, through the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, which was required, should have perhaps happened the moment decades ago Atal Bihari Vajpayee for the first time introduced in the parliament that resolution and later had to be withdrawn. But finally, there I durustai, and it did happen. But there are a lot of other changes that we need to understand. Many felt and many understood it wrongly that the abrogation of 370 in Kashmir will perhaps lead to the end of terrorism and end of violence, and many termed it that way. But as somebody who would understand and see developments in Kashmir, the external dimension, the internal dimension, will see this as a breaking of a barrier, a big hurdle that was there and had to be destroyed. So I will not go into detail. We've debated this ad nauseum, what 370 was, why it was important, why it happened. Of course, there's a Gupkar alliance now that is building up pressure for statehood as well as restoration of 370. Personally speaking, I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening even through the Supreme Court of India. Because it is discriminatory, it should not be there, and it isn't there. Statehood is debatable, of course. Many of us felt that statehood is required. When it can happen is, of course, another debate. But what I want to speak today is about the challenges on ground. Interestingly, I came late to the session today because I was having lunch with a very senior army officer who has just been posted to Jammu and Kashmir. And one of our parting thoughts was that, he invited me to Kashmir and said that, tomorrow I'm taking the first flight and I'll be assuming charge. And I said, where will you be stationed? He said, I said, will it be Badami Bagh, as always? So he said, no, I'll be on Gupkar Road. So, in many ways in Delhi, we speak about Khan Market and taking over the Khan Market. So there has to be this drive to take over the Gupkar Road as well. We've seen these two elite families for a very long time, Abdullahs and Muftis, in power. Abdullahs for a very, very long time, and Muftis perhaps in the last 2 decades, seen a significant rise in Kashmir. But what will end it? Will, Taqiyyanusi things of, just filling in the political gaps or engaging with separatists or engaging with even mainstream politicians who believe in separatism. For example, Mehbooba Mufti, who says that there will not be a single shoulder left in Kashmir to unfurl the tricolour. Or Farooq Abdullah, who suddenly appears and says that we'll seek China's help for restoration of 370. So how do you tackle such a thought process, such mindset? Will it be only through DDC elections and Panchayat elections in the 3-tier of the Panchayati Raj system? I believe this is a beginning. But we need to think at a much specific level, much deeper ground level. And that will happen only when we understand what's been happening, at least for the last decade or so in Kashmir particularly. And I personally believe that this is a non-violent movement that they are bringing, and many of you would be surprised why I say this. We know the external dimension of Pakistan-sponsored terror or proxy terror that has been happening and perhaps will continue for many, many years. But we do not understand that since 2007 and 2008, the separatists, particularly the Hurriyat, etc., changed their game plan and started a non-violent movement. I would advise many of you to read this book by Gene Sharp, From Dictatorship to Democracy, and understand what this game plan really is of the radical separatists and their entire plan in the last decade. And there was a letter, I won't go into details, but Prime Minister of Pakistan wrote a letter to Gilani, and there was an interlocutor set up by New Delhi who became that emissary who delivered that letter, imagine, of the Pakistan Prime Minister to Gilani. And that said that we need to do intifada, but this has to be a non-violent style. Yes, stone pelting, etc., etc., but you have to do a non-violent movement, and we will support you entirely on that. And that triggered this entire resistance leadership. We, of course, saw the Amarnath land agitation that happened and counter-agitation. We saw the Burhan Wani episode. We saw many other such incidents that took almost like a national shape and triggered a national debate all across, led to curfew, led to shutdown, led to lockdown in many ways. I believe a counter to such a so-called non-violent movement by these Hurriyat or radical separatists, or of course many of them are arrested now after the NIA raids, is to have a counter non-violent movement, which I term as a tricolor revolution. Now this tricolor revolution or the cleansing that will happen in Kashmir has to be through civil society from Kashmir itself. And that can happen at many levels. I'll give you a couple of examples and then I'll just end my initial remarks. We see several terror attacks that happen in Kashmir. And of course, we have a lot of hatred about Pakistan-sponsored terror. Naturally, I as a Kashmiri Pandit feel very strongly about it. I've spoken very passionately against separatism and terrorism. But in the mean process, we forget the players that get involved at the ground level. There is a terrorist that appears and takes shelter at a Kashmiri's house. Kashmiri willingly or unwillingly shelters him. There is an encounter that takes place. The house is destroyed in the process. 3 terrorists are killed finally. And in the mean process, security forces leave. We celebrate. We, of course, break it on prime time. There's a debate. End of the story. What we don't understand is that the separatists next day appear on that house and say, आपके साथ तो इतनी बड़ी जाती हो गई, आपका घर जो आपने 30 साल से बनाया वो तो खत्म कर दिया, आप हुर्रियत में आप participate कीजिए. Now you become a formal part of Hurriyat, you become part of JKLF or others, and next thing that we know is that a person from that family or a neighborhood family joins the terror ranks and is radicalized. Now see another scenario where security forces or somebody from the government goes to that family, says that yes, we have destroyed your house, it was in national interest, had to be done, but we'll repair your house. This will be done in the next 3 months process, we'll pay for it. In the meantime, government will have an accommodation for you and you are sorted. You are an Indian citizen, we'll take care. The terrorists try to use you and end of the story. We don't think about such de-radicalization in many ways. In many, many of these years, so many hundreds of such people have been radicalized in similarly saying that हमारा घर हो गया, हमारे बूढ़े माँ बाप को पीटा, हमारे के साथ ये हुआ, but we haven't shown concern the other side. So there has to be this tricolor revolution because this family 6 months later will motivate their neighbor. The neighbor will see कि अरे यार इन्होंने तो घर पे टेररिस्ट को शरण दी और सरकार ने इनका घर बना दिया. अगली बार आतंकवादी मेरे यहाँ आएगा तो मैं टिप ऑफ दूंगा सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस को and we'll just get things done. So this is just a small example. So I see Kashmir as an aquarium. Kashmir is an aquarium. The fishes are the radical separatists inside. Some mainstream politicians also who are involved with the other side. And water is people. The entire glass is the ecosystem and the barrier that is between them. So we have to strike at this ecosystem. We have to strike at this ecosystem and finish this glass barrier so that the people will assimilate with the rest of India. One positive thing has happened, 370 abrogation happened. A lot changed, but a lot more needs to change on ground. I think DDC election should have happened many, many years ago. The Panchayat election should have happened many, many years ago. Unfortunately, there was centralization of power to Gupkar. These two families and a limited few, handful of others, enjoyed money, power, muscle, and destroyed lives of Kashmiris for many, many years. And now I think there should be a beginning. Lastly, I would say that New Delhi has committed many mistakes in Jammu and Kashmir as well. Let's be very factual about it. And I have no shame in naming and shaming also people. We've had some very dynamic security experts like Mr. Dullat and others who had a very, unusual policy on Kashmir, and we paid the price for it. I think the same policies need not be repeated. J&K is heading towards a positive change, and I think it's time that Gupkar doesn't call the shots, be it the right side of Gupkar or the left side of Gupkar, and I hope people on the panel would understand what I say. There needs to be people-centric approach, and people need to be deciding their fate. I think the grassroots democracy will get a lot of encouragement through these DDC elections, etc. But I think the involvement of the civil society needs to be immense. There needs to be sense of security in common people, because there are a lot of Kashmiri Muslim youth who come to me that, we want to speak about India, but tomorrow we are threatened. Somebody calls our father, mother, and we are threatened, so we are not able to do it. So a sense of security needs to be given. Civil society needs to be given much more prominence, and there are activities that need to be organized. I mean, a simple activity like a dull lake cleaning exercise, if NGOs or civil society from New Delhi and other parts of India join hands with Kashmiri people, things can change drastically. I know it's not an overnight process. It's been 3 decades of this terror ecosystem, secessionism and radicalism. And that's why I say that you don't only have to kill a terrorist in Kashmir. You have to kill terrorism. You have to kill radicalism. You have to kill secessionism in Kashmir. If we understand that process, I think we'll go far in this entire exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. Ramandoji, Mukundaji, Aditya, thank you to the India Foundation for inviting me to what has clearly been a very intellectually stimulating conclave. Kashmir is unambiguously passing through very interesting times. These seem to be crossroads of history, both in the aftermath of the constitutional changes affected in Jammu and Kashmir, and also recently, looking at the District Development Council elections and the impressive turnout that these elections have garnered. The last phase saw a turnout of around 50%. The People's Alliance, as Aditya has spoken about it, contested the elections as well as an alliance. But I have reason to believe that the turnout is not somehow, it's not a simple assumption to make that the turnout is because of their participation in the polls. Whenever we talk about, I'll specifically talk about Kashmir and what ails Kashmir, because the diagnosis of historical blunders is something which is important before we talk about a future course of action or what the future, holds for Kashmir, both in a political sense, an economic sense, in a social and cultural sense. We have been ruled by a traditional mainstream, eventually for nearly 4 decades monopolized by one family, then for the last decade and a half monopolized by an oligarchy of 2 families. And it's very interesting, if you go to the speeches made in this conclave itself, and Mr. Sen Gupta made this speech when I was entering, and he spoke about Calcutta University. And I really wanted to mention this here, that when you talk about the Renaissance in West Bengal, the cultural, educational Renaissance, around 50 years later, in the 1920s,
Uh, I'm sure Ramadhavji must have read about it in history. This thing, this movement of educated young men who had returned from Kashmir started in Srinagar. It was called the Reading Room movement. So 6 young educated men who had come back to Kashmir and were one of the first educated Muslims in Kashmir, my grandfather was one of them, started this movement which included both Hindus and Muslims. So Pandit Premnath Bajaj was an educated Pandit who was part of the Glancy Commission too. Uh, they focused, and this was the time of the Dogra monarchy. So they focused on empowerment of an average Kashmiri, regardless of his religion. Obviously, the Muslims felt more aggrieved because the ruling monarchy was Hindu. But that never meant that the struggle for the restoration of democratic rights of the people of Kashmir was religious at that point of time, and it never was, not up till 1947. And the irony is that National Conference, which was originally the Muslim Conference in certain ways was more inclusive and more tolerant than the converted National Conferences. So the change in terminology did not make National Conference more inclusive. But that's a longer discussion. So over the, if you trace Kashmir's history from 1947 till now, you will realize that this monopoly over Indianness in Kashmir translated into the fact that an average Kashmiri was deliberately kept disillusioned and disenchanted. So somebody like a Farooq Abdullah, I always say this, would come to Delhi and posture as an Indian statesman. But he would go and address a rally the next day in Kashmir and say that Kashmir's accession, Jammu and Kashmir's accession to the Union of India was a blunder. But in the present day of, electronic media and where you can't afford to say diametrically opposite things in 2 different geographical locations, these things started to get exposed. But the end result was that you had a very disenchanted, perpetually, disoriented average Kashmiri who was deliberately told that, he's been wronged and he cannot move on until the historic blunders are recorrected. So the National Conference for a period of time became the Plebiscite Front. Then there was the period of the Democratic National Conference, and then the Indira Abdullah Accord happened in 1953. And National Conference basically became an offshoot of INC for a while. When you talk about 370, we don't mention this a lot of times, but there were 47 erosions made by the Indian National Congress in Article 370. It was virtually hollowed out, and a friend of mine says this, that all the BJP-led government did is that there was this empty bottle of water on the table, and they said, "Ye khali bottle kyun table pe rakhiye? Pick it up and throw it out." But the devolution of a state into a union territory, that obviously has been taken as an insult, and there are a lot of people who say that that was an action done out of spite. And obviously we want the restoration of statehood, because this is a time when UTs are upgraded into states, so states should not be downgraded into UTs. But again, that's a completely different discussion. So now you've seen there's this phase. I'll just take a couple of minutes to talk about that too. There was this phase when the Abdullahs dominated the political mainstream in Kashmir. And for nearly 40 years, they did not recognize Mufti Mohammad Said, despite the fact that he became the home minister of the country in the VP Singh government. Then a period came when they started tolerating him and accepting him as an equal in the mainstream. Then they fought against each other. Again, another joke is that I remember there was this time when Mehbooba Mufti almost went on a hunger strike demanding Farooq Abdullah's arrest in the J&K Cricket Association scam. And just a couple of months ago, there was the same Dr. Farooq Abdullah was interrogated for the JK Cricket Association. It's a multi-crore scam. And Mehbooba Mufti said that this is victimhood and, this is a misuse of agencies, who almost went on a hunger strike 2 years ago demanding that he should be arrested. So the union is full of contradictions. The union of the traditional mainstreams, they have come together as a survival mechanism. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Will they actually survive and sustain? That time will tell. The DDC elections are happening now. There is a good turnout. I believe that a lot of independent faces and alternative powers in the mainstream will make inroads. again, Aditya said a word which I really wanted to talk about before this, is that whenever we talk about the integration of Jammu and Kashmir with the rest of the country, I think we should also talk more about assimilation. You know, I've been a student of anthropology for a very brief amount of time, and you know, you talk about the difference between assimilation and integration, and what are the negative connotations, perceptive connotations of integration. Uh, the psychological assimilation of a Kashmiri will happen when you tell an average Kashmiri that your Indianness is not, you know, stereotyped. It is not strictly or narrowly defined, and try to convey to an average Kashmiri the beauty of the idea of India. You know, we talk about the need for an average Indian to embrace an average Kashmiri. I'll go a step further. I mean, I've gone to a boarding school in India. I've grown up in this beautiful country. I am a proud Kashmiri. I am a proud Indian. I don't see any contradiction between the two identities. I think the time has also come for an average Kashmiri to embrace the idea of India. And that will happen when you will actually expose him to the beauty of the idea of India. That is what the future should hold. The DDC elections is a very important milestone. It will empower the grassroots democracy. The Gram Raj system is again very important. We need to come over a traditional bureaucracy in Jammu and Kashmir, which is not very favorable to the idea of decentralization of power. I think the future will be defined by a statesmanly vision of whoever is in power in the center, to understand that in a place like Jammu and Kashmir, which has been a victim of both blunders committed by successive governments in Delhi and also cross-border terrorism and misguided policies and radicalism and fundamentalism, the future will be defined by the will to place national interests before partisan interests, electoral interests, and DDC elections is a first step towards that direction. It doesn't really matter who wins the DDC elections, what the seat sharing is. That's, in my view, that is also an important question, but that's a secondary question. What is far more important is that 50% Kashmiris came out and voted for local candidates in territorial local bodies. That is more important. The restoration of faith in democracy. And I hope that eventually the statehood is restored. I hope that assembly elections are held and the state has the union territory, and hopefully eventually the state has a popular elected government. Young faces, I hope, start coming and reclaiming their place in the mainstream. And you know, slowly but steadily, this psychological confusion, this identity crisis needs to be dealt with. During my previous term as the mayor of Srinagar, I started this project of installing nearly 100, you know, high-mast tricolors in the city. And this officer came to me and he said, "ये क्यों करना है? आपका तो वैसे भी security का issue रहता है, ये रहता है. Why do you want to? It's a controversial thing." I said, I don't want my child to grow up with a confusion about his national identity. Apart from this being an emotive issue, I'm not trying to be, you know, patriotic here. I'm trying to be a practical father. Generations have suffered in Kashmir because of this uncertainty कि कुछ होगा, issue resolve होगा, कुछ होगा, issue resolve होगा. We grew up with that. I think the future should be defined by this acceptance that the future of Jammu and Kashmir lies with the Union of India, and I firmly believe that. Decentralization of power is a step in the right direction, and I think the most important thing, Aditya touched that too, is the eradication of the monopoly of the traditional mainstream in Kashmir. That they are somehow the bridge that connects the people of Kashmir with the rest of the country. They are not the bridge. They are the ravine which separates the people of Kashmir from the rest of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Junaid and Aditya, for those initial comments. Friends, I will open the house for any comments and questions from all of you. Get ready and let me know if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I will start a small conversation with both the panelists. First to Junaid. what is it that actually comes in the way of an average Kashmiri accepting the idea of India? What are those issues that make him feel that he is not part of the idea of India?
Part of, I think the disenchantment is both aspirational as well as grievance related. And it's mostly grievance related. When you uh, allow or facilitate a young average Kashmiri to partake in the developmental story of the country, in the liberalization of the country, in the economic growth of the country, in the cultural social renaissance of the country, uh, I think an average Kashmiri will realize that, there's absolutely.
But in India, we have, I have traveled extensively in Jammu and Kashmir, Kashmir Valley also. And I have traveled extensively in the rest of the country, especially in the northeast. We have much more deprived, underdeveloped areas in many other parts of the country where we don't have this problem of not identifying with the idea of India. Are there any deeper issues involved for us to address? I mean, if you are taking a 10-year span, is it just about development? Suppose if we give them more jobs, as Aditya pointed out, if we build houses to some victims of terrorism, will that address that alienation aspect? Or alienation is much more deep-rooted?
Well, sir, I see your point, uh, but the fulcrum to exploit deprivation in Jammu and Kashmir is Pakistan, or the history of conflict, or you can call it, the religious fundamentalism that exists. Jammu and Kashmir remains to be the only Muslim majority state in the country. So those factors don't exist in the Northeast. So there might be subnational identities in the Northeast, but those ethnic subnational identities don't find uh, as strong as evocation and consequently as strong as a manipulative power that Pakistan has in Jammu and Kashmir. So the conflict, I think, the conflict exploits deprivation. So it's a complicated kind of relationship between, as I said, the aspirational issues, the subnational identity, the religious identity of Kashmiri Muslims, as well as the fact that they have been severely deprived through maladministration and misgovernance over the last 7 decades.
Aditya Raj Kaulji, you have been a journalist who extensively covered the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, whether it is the current leadership, the so-called Gupkar leadership, or previously the individually those parties and all, have always catered to some sort of separatism in various different degrees. PDP might be a little more, open, more, its stronger version, milder version was NC and all that. Doesn't that mean that there existed a very strong constituency in Kashmir that believed that no, our integration with the rest of the country was forced? Do you think that constituency still exists?
Firstly, I'll touch briefly about the first question also. The problem here is the politics of Jammu and Kashmir starts mainly for the mainstream regional political parties, NC and PDP, by saying that you're not Indian. And there is something that is missing. It's like a cloud that has been put before Kashmiris, saying that, the mainstream Indian living in New Delhi, living in Kolkata, in Bangalore, has something more than you have. It's not the truth, it's not the reality. But the psychological game plan has been such that one talks about autonomy, the other talks about self-rule in the last many, many decades. And the end objective, even while winning elections, wasn't development. It wasn't grassroots democracy. It wasn't uplifting the common Kashmiris who are living in the interiors of Pulwama, Baramulla, or Shopian. It wasn't getting them more jobs or ensuring that they reach pinnacles of their career. The end result was autonomy और सेल्फ रूल. द एंड रिजल्ट वाज कि भाई हिंदुस्तान ने आपसे कुछ चीज़ छिपा के रखी हुई है, वो आपको मिलनी है, लेकिन कश्मीरियों को ये नहीं पता था कि ये है क्या. तो मैं आपको एक छोटा सा उदाहरण देता हूँ बिफोर आई टच द अदर पार्ट ऑल्सो. I went to Pulwama, and I spoke about it last time also when I was speaking on the Kashmir session. 4 days after the abrogation of Article 370, the GOC advised me कि आप श्रीनगर में तो सारे पत्रकार हैं, आप पुलवामा जाइए. So I went to Pulwama in the interiors of, where unfortunately the CRPF convoy attack happened and 40 of our Jawans passed away. So I went to a masjid there, and in the interiors near the Crew Shrine. So there was namaz happening, and Maulvi along with youth was coming out. So I just asked him, he didn't realize that I'm a Kashmiri. So I asked him कि मौलवी साहब तो ये 370 तो हटा दिया, अब आप क्या चाहते हैं, मतलब क्या लगता है आपको? तो he said कि नहीं, he started screaming, he became very agitated and said कि नहीं, ये तो हमारा बुनियादी हक है, ये हिंदुस्तान ने छीन लिया, इसके लिए हम मर मिटने को तैयार हैं. I said बहुत अच्छी बात है, मैं इसको पब्लिश करूँगा या आगे डालूंगा, लेकिन रीज़न क्या है, मतलब कुछ थोड़ा सा आप एग्जाम्पल मुझे समझाएं कि क्या खोया है आपने, क्या पाना चाहते हैं आप. He said नहीं हमारे पास, first he thought a lot, then he said कि नौकरियाँ नहीं हैं, जो हमारी यहाँ पर नौकरियाँ हैं वो छिन जाएंगी. I said क्या नौकरियाँ आपके पास? He said कि हमारे यहाँ पर सीमेंट की फैक्ट्रियाँ और ब्रिक क्लिन हैं. I said कितने हैं? He said कि 6-7 हैं. I said कितनी नौकरियाँ हो जाती होंगी? He said 200-250 लोग हैं. I said वो बेवकूफ़ी होगा जो हिंदुस्तान के किसी भी कोने से ऐसी जगह पर अपने बच्चे को भेजेगा जहाँ पर आतंकवाद है, लोग मर रहे हैं. मैंने बोला दिल्ली में अगर दंगे चल रहे हैं, क्या आपने बच्चे को आप भेजेंगे वहाँ पर पढ़ाई करने के लिए या कुछ करने के लिए? ऐसी नौकरियाँ तो जाएंगी ही नहीं. He said नहीं, मुझे आपसे डिस्कशन करना ही नहीं है, मैं अपनी जान दे दूंगा, लेकिन 370 तो वापस आना पड़ेगा. Now what we don't realize in the process is that every day on Friday, after the prayers, there is a sermon that happens, political sermon for half an hour at least. And every Friday, common Kashmiris who do not know and who treat Maulvi as a godly figure, whatever that Maulvi says is the truth. So he says कि भाई हमें जंग लड़नी है, आप हिंदुस्तानी नहीं हैं, आपको पत्थर मारने हैं, आपके साथ ज़्यादती हो रही है. No reasoning, no scientific, logical reasoning, nothing at all. So this we haven't been able to tackle, unfortunately. Last year I was also, some, great minds in the security system asked me for advice also. So I told them, I said, this is positive development, but जब तक आप grassroots level पर ये radicalization नहीं हटाएंगे, तब तक कुछ नहीं होगा. I mean, Burhan Wanis will come and go. There will be more Burhan Wanis will have, that will come. So unfortunately, this political discourse of J&K also needs to change. And this doesn't only have to change between PDP and NC. It has to change from BJP also to a great extent. We don't have to see Jammu and Kashmir as only a land, Since we are talking internally, I'll be a devil's advocate also. We don't have to see, unfortunately, I'll go to one comment that came, funny as it may be, but not justified. Immediately after 370 abrogation, a chief minister of a state said कि भाई अब तो हम वहाँ से शादी करेंगे, लड़कियाँ आएंगी, ये होगा, and that became a major controversy. So I think we need to be more mature in understanding what a giant step government of India took and how maturely we can deal with that situation. So locally, the discourse has to change drastically. NC and PDP specifically have to be told that autonomy and self-rule are things of the past. They are in the dustbin of history. You need to seek your votes on development, what changes you can make on ground. And J&K is an integral Indian territory. You can't now have your politics again on the same, mechanism of 370, 35A, and such things.
Go ahead. You can be.
So I am pursuing my PhD on radicalism and insurgency, and it's a comparative study of Assam and North Caucasus. North Caucasus is a region in Russia which we can clearly draw a parallel with the issue in Kashmir. So North Caucasus was earlier a part of Russia, and since 1991, the disintegration, they have demanded autonomy. They got it. But what happened since autonomy, they could not develop their region. So they have been dealing with the same problems that we in Kashmir see: misgovernance, poor rate of employment, hardly any progress. And places like Dagestan in North Caucasus have good reserves of oil and gas, but they do not have techniques to explore that and provide employment and enrich people's life. So, and we have a determined leadership in the form of Putin, just like we have in India in the form of Narendra Modi. So what Putin has done is he's appointed his own governors. So the entire administration of places like the Muslim-dominated pockets of Dagestan and Ossetia have been replaced by Russian administrators, governors, all the positions which could be appointed, just like we have Manoj Sinha ji now in Kashmir. So this is how they have dealt with. And the problem have been the same. They have been instilled with a fear psychosis that if Russia becomes your master, if we are led by Russia, then your autonomy would be taken away. For so many decades, I mean, for last 30 years, they did not realize that in that fear, in that petty concern, they lost employment, they lost development, and the only reason was they were fully funded by Muslim countries and they wanted to establish caliphate. My question is, it's an open question along with the observation that, I mean, we have a much better condition in Kashmir. So do we see that kind of brainwashing in a common Kashmiri that they also want to establish anything of that sort? Thank you.
Somebody else also wanted, huh? Ujjwal?
I can very well understand the radicalization which innocent youth or children or people from the past would have gone through. Some journalists, some politicians, some families, or the neighboring country would have their vested interests. But what is this entire radicalization of the whole world about Kashmir? I mean, how can everybody think similarly? I mean, you talk about US, you talk about Canada, you talk about Europe, or even some people in India, some students. I've not been able to understand this entire thing. Apart from the vested interest, what is it regarding Kashmir?
So, Junaid, the thing that Aditya alluding to was that besides Pakistan, there were local factors also for radicalization. Will this whole process of trying to hand over power back to the people of Kashmir, you also talked about elections, local body elections and all, will that help us in overcoming this issue of radicalization? Power in the hands of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, will that help?
It will help if it is done on ground. What we have seen, we had the BDC elections before this, I think, a year back, the Block Development Council. And so we amended the warrant of precedent and we said the BDC chairman in protocol will come equivalent to a brigadier and a DC. I had fielded candidates, I had BDC chairpersons who were in office, but you would still see them humiliated outside the offices of Patwari. So eventually, if it happens on ground, that will be, the difference. I believe that there are other factors at play other than Pakistan, absolutely. But again, I would kind of stick my neck out and say that there are blunders that, New Delhi commits to in Kashmir. I remember last year during COVID, when we were battling the pandemic, and I remember I spoke to you about this too. I said that it is very rare for a young Kashmiri or the generation at large to demand something which is deliverable and which is definable. And there was this huge demand for the restoration of 4G internet. And since I was born in Kashmir, this was the first time that the young generation in Kashmir was asking something which was deliverable, which would not have been a disaster, and which could have, at that point of time, be seen as a step of magnanimity. But we failed to do that. Internet is misused everywhere. There are ways and mechanisms. So it's just an example. There are provocations and instigations from the state side as well. Historically, there have been provocations which could have been dealt with in a better manner. External factors, again, I'll again go back to the 4G issue. You look at the speeches made by US congressmen, congresswomen, or senators, and a lot of them will talk about 4G, the deprivation of internet. It's a basic fundamental right. You have 2G. hell will not break loose if you restore 4G. But the psychological global impact of restoring the same internet that you have in Delhi and Srinagar is this. But then again, the police establishment, some police officer will say, sir, if you restore 4G, sir, ये statistics यहाँ से यहाँ जाएंगे, वहाँ पे ये होगा, वहाँ पे, and somebody in Delhi will get scared and say, नहीं नहीं मुझे restore नहीं करना है, ठीक है रहने दो. So the policy apparatus needs to connect itself to the ground. I believe that's a.
Mukundaji, after him.
Just I wanted to know, apart from this political, administrative, security changes that have come after abrogation of 2017, what's about the dynamics between the OBC, SC, ST sections, both in Valley and also in Jammu, especially in the Valley, to see the whole population as a Muslim population is one thing. Another thing is these so many social groups. Just said OBCs, SC, ST. Is there any transformation or psychological change happening after this change in this 1 year?
So I think there are two aspects to it. Two questions, I think one by Mukunji and one by Ujjwal. The sections that you're talking about are primarily in Jammu. So yes, I think for the first time, there are different sections who are going to vote in these elections. Junaid can correct me if I'm wrong. One large chunk of that population is the West Park refugees who are participating. I think Valmikis also, I'm not exactly sure, I think Junaid can correct me if I'm wrong. Valmikis as well, which is a huge section. I mean, I remember when Supreme Court heard this for the first time, and a large chunk of India, perhaps large chunk of people in New Delhi, in the North Block and South Block also did not know that there was this huge discrimination happening with the Valmiki community. I mean, in the India of 2019, when this happened finally, we had a situation where a section of the population and their children could only apply for municipal work as sanitization workers. If this was happening in any other part of India, a certain section of the left liberals and would have created riot-like situation that how can this happen? Just because it was J&K, and unfortunately we have only one Taregami Saab leftist in I think Kulgam of South Kashmir, we do not see much of this. But I will just briefly touch about Ujjwal's question also. It was a very good question and something that unfortunately our policymakers and security establishment does not deal with. This is the problem and failure of messaging. You know, it is not that we do not engage. I would just refer you to read a report by the EU Disinformation Lab that has been released just yesterday. And although it is critical of India, but you would understand that what all India has been doing. So it's not that India hasn't been doing anything. But I've been reiterating this several times, particularly after what happened in Balakot, what a huge step India took, and then after 370. These were all both historic steps in 1 year, within a matter of few months. But still, I mean, on messaging front, we've completely failed. I think engagement is the question. I think the intra-ministry between External Affairs Ministry, Home Ministry, and Information Broadcasting Ministry and others, and it's not just with the BJP. I mean, it has happened in the past also, that the bureaucracy has had such a lackadaisical approach that they just don't know how to tackle, the messaging. And there is an ecosystem. The ecosystem that I talked about is not just in politics and separatism. There are journalists, there are media houses who have been supporting this radicalism and separatism. I mean, Greater Kashmir being the biggest example, Rising Kashmir. Now they've changed their tune. I mean, we do see some journalism happening. But for decades together, see their editorial, see the pages were filled with hate for India. So this has been happening for a very long time. And secondly, I'll give you an example, again playing devil's advocate. I was telling Ram Madhavji just before this, the same thing. There's a place called Saura in Kashmir. And it's a hot belt, outskirts of Srinagar, very, very, a hot belt of radicalism. And immediately after abrogation, there was a huge protest that was organized there. Because of obviously internet shutdown, it didn't get covered. But after a few days, I think a BBC chap managed to get a clip of it, and it became a huge story, massively. Immediately, the government of India said that, it did not happen. This is just a fake story, wrong story. But within a week, they had to eat their words and say that we apologize, it did happen, but it was not a big affair. So imagine a situation where the government of India immediately after that protest had said that yes, the protest happened, only about 100 people participated. India is a democracy, we believe in dissent. It was the most peaceful protest, and imagine 370 has been such a successful event, only 100 people came out in Kashmir to protest, and situation would have been very different. So I think we haven't been able to calibrate and engage and do our messaging properly. I do hope that after Balakot and 370 we learn our lessons and change our way we deal with messaging.
Junaid, Aditya referred to Saura. Saura had huge turnout at the local body elections recently. So do you see the elections changing the narrative in the state? Do we see in coming days a sort of radicalism-free Kashmir, terrorism-free Kashmir in any near future? Is the democratic process helping us move in that direction?
It will certainly help, and I hope that, you know, that is the hope that we see a new dawn in Kashmir. You know, when we talk to our parents and they tell us that they lived in a very liberal and peaceful Kashmir, truly liberal, progressive Kashmir, where the Pandit and Muslim communities lived closely together. And I grew up in the, you know, pre-Exodus part, and I can vouch for that for the initial years of my childhood, that Kashmiri Pandits and Muslims lived in a very well-knit, you know, amity between each other. So I hope that the democratic process facilitates that, but I also hope that we keep evolving and learning we keep improvising, learning from mistakes we've committed. Mukundaji talked about the SC and ST things. So broadly, the narrative is we talk about Gujar Bakarwals and we talk about the Shia community. I mean, if you actually go and define it to the nuts and bolts. So both things, again, I'll tell you that the irony is in the post-abrogation period, the Shia community is considered to be a fairly pro-Indian community, a vote bloc with a very high voter percentage, because obviously the Shia community, because of what is happening in Pakistan, the intolerance, is not very enamored by the idea of Pakistan. During Muharram procession this year, after the abrogation of 370, it was the first time in the last 20 years that pellet guns were used on the Muharram procession because some SP somewhere lost his gold. And somebody did this editorial saying that this is for the first time that a Shia has started identifying with anti-India sentiment. So sometimes there are basic policing errors and mishandling which amount to a bigger loss. The bigger goal is reconciliation. Then you talk about the Gujar Bakarwal community. So there is this huge debate right now about the Forest Rights Act. So a lot of voices in Jammu says the Forest Rights Act should be maintained and you know, the forests should be cleansed and, you know, there is deforestation happening, right? Nobody is doubting that, and that is a priority too. But now again, the Gujar Bakarwal community has been perhaps the most pro-Indian constituency. They have worked closely with the army. It was that community which informed the army of the Kargil infiltration, have worked at close hand with the army. So now what we have done in the last couple of months, we have taken bulldozers into the forests and started dismantling makeshift cottages and huts of the Gujar Bakarwal community. So again, ironically, for the first time after so many years, the Gujar Bakarwals are also, rather than augmenting the pro-Indian constituency, sometimes because of local administrative blunders, we lose sight of the bigger goal. So I hope, you know, to answer your question, Ramadhaji, I hope that the future is defined by course corrections as well by a hope of a new dawn.
Yeah.
So I've always, as Aditya mentioned, you know, the radicalization in Kashmir has deep roots, right? It's very hard to actually uproot that process. As an educationist, I have deep faith in the educational process. Maybe I'm just an idealist in that regard, but I was wondering if and how the Indian educational system, the way it stands in Kashmir, imagines itself as a way out, you know, as a tool that can actually uproot or, you know, turn the youth away from the radicalization and that what they hear at the mosque. Do you think the school has any way near the ability or the capacity in the future to take that take that take that responsibility on?
Absolutely. I think there is no better medium. I think that is the most potent, the most effective, and the most powerful medium. Uh, Per se, first of all, upgrading our educational infrastructure, the quality of education that an average poor Kashmiri receives. Not everybody can afford a private educational institution. And, I'd like to share with you that once the 74th Amendment of the Indian Constitution has come into play, so education has now become a subdomain of the elected municipal corporation. So I have started taking over the government schools in Srinagar city, and I have decided that within a year we need to upgrade at least 30 of them into model, state-of-the-art schools. At least imagine the psychological effect of having a government school in downtown Srinagar with a swimming pool, when private schools don't have swimming pools or a computer lab. Imagine the psychological, perceptional impact of that. So not just the curriculum of education or the deliverance of education, but again, rudimentary basic infrastructure of education. If we upgrade that, if we upgrade our health infrastructure, I talk to my voters and constituents not outside Srinagar, in the outskirts of Srinagar, and there are areas which don't have ambulances, which don't have primary health centers. There are areas where miscarriages happen for the lack of an ambulance, and this is within Srinagar. So if we can just somehow talking about the educational infrastructure or the importance of education per se, I think there is no more powerful medium.
Just I just want to make a quick comment because I was thinking what Mukunji asked about the sections of the society, subdivisions, and particularly in Kashmir. And not just by going about SC, ST, and OBC. There are some different groups because of the nature of the violence that has happened over the last 3 decades. One is Shias that Junaid touched. And I'll give you a very brief story. I talked about Pulwama when I was in Pulwama. The same day I went to a village called Balhama. Balhama is a Shia village, and very close to Pampore. And in Balhama it's a Shia village and surrounded by Sunni villages. So I went there and I spoke to a couple of youth. One of them was a lawyer, and I asked him, "What about 370?" Again, and he said, he gave me a very neutral answer, saying that हमें इससे क्या? And he said, हो सकता है नौकरियां आए, हो सकता है कुछ भी हो सकता है. I had a brief conversation. He was very educated, and he was more concerned about कि internet नहीं है, मैं पढ़ूंगा कैसे 370 के बारे में. So I was very impressed with him. And later he said, I had a request. I said, yeah, tell me. He said, would you not publish my interview? I said, I won't, but what is the problem? He said, I know you're a Kashmiri Pandit, and आप लोग तो 90 में निकल गए, हमको तो यहीं रहना है. तो आप हमारा भी सोचो. So you can well understand the problem of the Shias. Second, in 2017, I was there in North Kashmir for a investigation story. I halted in Baramulla, and I met a family of Abdul Lone. He was a former terrorist. Now these former terrorists have a huge population. There must be about, if I'm not wrong, more than 50,000 families included. And he told me that he has 3 daughters. He stays in Kriri in Baramulla. And, he was in jail for 8 years. He came out, started job in the PWD department. Somehow the PWD department did not, give him money. So I tried to speak with the government and said, ki bhai, iska to kuch karo. And finally he was paid. I went to Kupwara and I met some Gujjars who were part of Hizbul Mujahideen and Al-Badr in 1990. And they told me how they had crossed over to Pakistan and then to Afghanistan. They were blindfolded. There was a colonel of the ISI who took them to Afghanistan for training with Mullah Umar. And they said कि यार हम तो हुर्रियत के खिलाफ बोलने को तैयार हैं, हुर्रियत तो सारा जड़ है. They have reformed entirely. But somehow the Indian government and the security establishment hasn't been able to use. Now I'm not saying that the Ikhwani system has to be replaced again. But this is a huge population of Kashmiris, of Kashmiri Muslims that wants to fight for India in Kashmir, put their own life in danger, but we haven't been able to use. So it's a huge constituency.
One last question, because we cannot leave this session without talking about Jammu. There always existed some kind of a cleavage between Jammu and Kashmir. Do you think that in the coming days, like, Ladakhis never wanted to be a part of Jammu and Kashmir, finally they got their UT. Jammuites, Aditya, you know very well, when they vote, they essentially vote against Kashmir in any election. How do we bridge this gap between people of Jammu and Kashmir, grievances of people of Jammu? Will there be any do we have any idea about how to address those challenges, those feelings of people of Jammu? Can Jammu and Kashmir become one strong unit as a state? What is your
Another important historical observation is that Jammu has always, sir, historically voted for the party in power at the center, without exception. And again, that is somehow that feeds from the rift between Kashmir and Jammu. There have been certain recent developments. The Katwa, we saw the mass agitation about the Katwa gang rape issue and how that kind of, deepened the divide between Jammu and Kashmir. Then there was before that, there was the Sri Amarnath agitation. And ever since that, since 2008, there has been a widening gulf between Kashmir and Jammu. And I think the best way to unify the two regions of the state is to look for similarities. And the similarities are in the aspiration and hope for a better life. There are deprived communities, there are deprived sections in Jammu, there are deprived communities and sections in Kashmir. Hopefully, maybe if we can transform our mainstream. The biggest problem is that our mainstream itself has exploited the wedge between Jammu and Kashmir. Congress always did it. National Conference and PDP, while Jammu voted against Kashmir, National Conference and PDP sought votes against the regional context in Jammu. So I think the exploitation of the wedge has also been the cause of the wedge, the traditional mainstream. If we can have a polity, a mainstream which treats Jammu and Kashmir as one, above and beyond the dividing lines of caste, creed, religion, language, and respects the diversity of both regions, I think we can go back. Again, if you go back to the 70s or the 80s, there was never any difference or wedge. Jammu was considered to be the gateway to Kashmir, and the consumer market for Jammu was in Kashmir. Both, I have recurring interactions with the Jammu Chamber of Commerce. The Jammu Chamber of Commerce and the Kashmir Chamber of Commerce are very well knit together. So maybe trade and business, economy at times is a unifying factor that we try to overlook. So maybe the economic necessity of Jammu and Kashmir, for Jammu and Kashmir to work together as two regions, I think we should build on that economic necessity.
Do you agree that instead of two, Jammu Kashmir should have been split into 3 UTs?
Well, I'll differ with my friend Junaid, and I would say that statehood of Jammu is a very rightful demand. But the step that India took in August of 2019 by keeping J&K together was the biggest national interest step that could have been taken. I'm not saying that the statehood can be given in the next 5 years. I'm not putting a timeline. I'm not saying that before or after the next assembly elections. But I think traditionally, culturally, and otherwise, Jammu identifies itself more with Pathankot, Jalandhar, and the rest of the region of Punjab across Lakhanpur rather than Kashmir. So I think just like Ladakh, which rightfully demanded and finally got a union territory, Jammu has to get its own character, etc. But not at this time. I spoke about 370 being a historic step in assimilation and integrity. But I think that was the first major step of it. I think a lot needs to be changed in the discourse, in the grassroots democracy, in the mindset of the people at the grassroots level. That will spark a change, and finally we can think of Kashmir as a different, as a state. Till that time, I don't think that J&K can be divided in any manner.
Aditya, just a small
Sure.
thing, just to complete the overall picture. When we talk about Jammu, Jammu and Kashmir, Jammu is one province, administrative province, and Kashmir is another. 40% of Jammu province is Kashmiri speaking, right? So it's a beehive. When you touch it, you know that the sentiment in Doda and Bhadarwah is leaning towards Kashmir because of religious and linguistic affinity, right? Then you talk about areas of Riyasi and Kathua as well. So if you go into fragmentation based on what do 2 or 3 districts of Jammu identify with, then the question of Bhadarwah and Kishtwar comes into play. Then Bhadarwah and Kishtwar districts, they will say that we identify with the Kashmir Valley. So then you go into the Durand line debate of, splitting the state on the basis of the Chenab line. So when do you stop fragmenting the state? So I think, and I understand and respect your point of view, I think that is not a plausible or a possible fragmentation, because then you leave Jammu and Udhampur and half of Kathua with, you make a state out of 2.5 districts. You know it for a fact that Doda and Bhadarwah and Kishtwar will then, at least 80% of Doda, Bhadarwah and Kishtwar, linguistically and religiously, will then align itself with the Kashmir Valley, resulting in another historical thing which we'll have to resolve for another 100 years.
That's why I said that it's not an easy way.
Yeah.
Cannot be done in a few years.
Okay.
And अब जो मधुमक्खी के हाथ में हाथ डाल ही दिया है अगस्त में, तो अब तो बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं.
Okay, so there the final comment you all heard. So मधुमक्खी के इसमें हाथ डाला है. कुछ मधु निकला है after the abrogation of Article 370, but साथ में honey bees भी पीछे पड़े हैं. We need to handle many issues in the next, coming years.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the India Foundation podcast. Do like, share, and subscribe the India Foundation channel.